On March 5th, 2009, Michael Jackson took to the stage at London's O2 Arena before thousands of fans and millions watching worldwide, unveiling This Is It, his long-awaited comeback tour and ultimately his final farewell.
This is it. I mean, this is really it. These will be my final show, the final curtain call. I'll see you in July.
But tragically, the world never got to see Michael perform one last time. June 25th, 2009, Michael Jackson was found dead in his home and the world was never the same. The king of pop had died. In this video, we're going to look at how Michael Jackson was living and how his last few years were like, and the lead up to Michael Jackson's death. Behind the excitement and anticipation surrounding This Is It, Michael Jackson was facing a very difficult reality. For years, the king of pop had lived a lavish lifestyle, spending millions on everything from luxury properties to artwork and to maintaining his famous Neverland Ranch. While his music continued to generate enormous revenue, mounting debts and financial obligations began to take a toll on Michael. By 2009, reports suggested that Michael owed hundreds of millions of dollars to various creditors. Neverland Ranch had narrowly avoided foreclosure, and the financial pressure was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. At the time, Randy Phillips, the CEO, was managing a lot of Michael's artistic direction, and his mission was to get Michael Jackson out of debt and to make this tour a record-breaking success. What began as a planned series of 10 concerts at London's O2 Arena quickly expanded to an overwhelming demand. For Jackson, the shows represented more than just a return to the stage. They offered the opportunity to rebuild his finances, restore his public image, and remind the world why he remained one of the greatest entertainers of all time. The plan was for just 10 shows. Demand was extraordinary. Tickets sold out instantly, prompting promoter AEG Live to add more dates. What began as a 10-show run grew to 50 concerts. Despite the expansion, Michael reportedly made it clear that 50 shows was the absolute limit he could do. According to those close to him, he had no intention of performing more than that. Behind the scenes, however, the scale weighed heavily on him. His mother, Catherine Jackson, later recalled Michael expressing concern about the demand, the commitment, allegedly telling her, "They're gonna kill me with 50 shows." As rehearsals began, Michael appeared determined to prove that he could still deliver a world-class performance and a show. The production was ambitious, featuring elaborate stage designs, groundbreaking visuals, and some of the most complex choreography of his career. Yet beneath that determination, there were growing signs of concern. Several people involved with the production noticed that Michael's physical condition seemed to fluctuate. Some days he appeared energetic and focused. On others, he looked exhausted, thin, fragile. Among those who became extremely concerned was Kenny Ortega, the show's director and Jackson's longtime collaborator. Ortega later spoke about the moments when Michael appeared weak, worried, and he was very concerned about his overall well-being. Ortega tried to support him and encourage him and those around him to ensure Michael was receiving proper care.
My friend wasn't right, that he wasn't well. There was something going on that was deeply troubling me. And I did ask him questions and he did answer me. I did feel, though, that he was, not well.
Despite these concerns, rehearsals continued as the opening night was drawing closer. To the public, This Is It looked like the triumphant return for the king of pop. But behind the scenes, questions were beginning to emerge about whether Michael was physically strong enough to withstand the enormous demand of the comeback he spent months preparing for. In a lot of clips you see of Michael that were specifically shot for the This Is It documentary, a lot of people were wondering, why did Michael Jackson die? And why did he not receive the proper care? And what was going on, and what was leading up to his death? There were many warnings and concerns that were put forward by many members of staff. Michael's makeup artist and long-term collaborator of 20 years, Karen Faye, later said in court, Michael was so thin you could see his bones. Kenny Ortega would constantly put forward his concerns and even claimed he had to feed Michael with a spoon and was taking care of him, and sometimes would even send him home. But in show business, the show must go on, and with that logic, AEG were doing everything they could to get Michael in working condition. His personal doctor at the time, Conrad Murray, even raised many concerns himself. He was being paid around $150,000 a month. A lot of people wonder, how did Michael meet Conrad Murray? Well, once he took care of Paris Jackson, Michael's daughter, which gained Michael's trust, and while the shows were a lot to handle, the pressure for the shows was coming up and Michael needed a lot of care. His body was going through it. What a lot of people don't know is Michael Jackson was suffering from a range of things that were triggered a lot earlier on in his career, and that he was still fighting for still to this day. Michael Jackson had suffered with chronic insomnia for years at this point, along with anxiety, muscle pain, and much more. His regular medication was powerful sedatives and painkillers, which he had taken for a long time at that point, which developed into an addiction, as Michael had been taking these since his 1984 Pepsi commercial accident, which left him with second and third degree burns. And the medication he had been taking was very strong and the kind you would get addicted from. Especially after the 2005 trial, things got worse for Michael. This trial had been a long and exhausting one and took a toll on his mental health. Michael reached new heights with his medication. Michael moved on to extreme doses and was not only trying to heal his physical pain, but also his mental pain. At this point, Michael was suffering a lot emotionally and physically. He had unbearable internal pain, paranoia, insomnia, anxiety, and much more. Michael was not seeking medication for just treatment, but also as an escape from reality. Michael at this point in time felt like the whole world hated him. He was taking so much medication to take away the pain that he had been carrying his whole life. This video simply highlights the last few years of his life, and you could only imagine how much pain he was going through during his final years. And honestly, who could blame him? Michael Jackson had been famous since the age of 9, and so much had happened in his 10s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, and the last few years were a lot for him to handle. Those involved on the tour were expected to continue with their responsibilities and keep the production moving forward. In one email that was highlighted in court from Kenny Ortega that was sent to the AEG boss Paul Gongaware, he said, "We want to remind Murray, it is AEG and not Michael Jackson who is paying him." Funny enough, when in court, Gongaware completely denied this and said he could not remember sending the email and it was simply short-form communication. After some tension in previous weeks, on June 19th, less than a week away before Michael's death, an emergency meeting took place at Michael's house with the AEG executives Conrad Murray and Kenny Ortega. And there was some form of tension still going on when Murray told Ortega, "Don't act like a doctor, direct the show and leave Michael's health to me." And with Murray's assurance, AEG decided to go ahead with the rehearsals, and Michael would later go on to miss some of those rehearsals. And when he was there, he would hardly participate. But after a few days, on June 23rd, which this is about 2 days before his death, Michael would come back better than ever and had so much energy, and he would convince everyone he was doing just fine. Mind you, rehearsals were for almost 2 hours. The meetings highlighted a growing tension behind the scenes. While some members of the team were alarmed by Michael's condition, the countdown to the first concert was rapidly approaching, and millions of dollars was riding on the success of This Is It. Michael Jackson, on June 24th, a day before his death, also rehearsed very fiercely and gave a lot of confidence to his team. But that night, everything would change forever. Michael Jackson had been struggling with a lot of insomnia and was very tired from rehearsals and did not sleep at all that whole night. Murray was called by him at 10 p.m. and again at 1 a.m., complaining how he could not sleep and needed some strong medication to keep him asleep. Murray did not give Michael any medication, but after Michael constantly went at him and asking him, he gave in. He finally gave in. At the time, Michael was on very strong stuff, and to those around him, he was taking something called milk, which is a cocktail of different types of medications and very strong sedatives. This is a recording that Michael took when the milk started taking effect. Listen to how different his voice sounds.
We have to be when people leave the show, when people leave my show, I want to say, I've never seen nothing like this in my life. Go. I've never seen nothing like this.
At almost 11 a.m., Michael finally goes up to sleep, but unfortunately, he would never wake up. At almost midday, Murray realizes that Michael Jackson is not breathing, and instead of calling the ambulance, Murray calls his girlfriend and wastes precious time. But instead of calling for help, he calls Michael's personal assistant. He also called the security guard, which shocked the security as he claimed he was giving Michael Jackson CPR with one hand. And finally, he was told to call 911 when it wasn't working. 5 minutes later, the ambulance arrived and found Michael Jackson without a pulse and not breathing. At 1:07 p.m., Michael arrives at the Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center, where they tried to revive him for almost an hour. But unfortunately, at 2:26 p.m., doctors officially announced Michael Jackson as dead. He was only 50 years of age.
The first port of call for a lay person is to call 911. They're calling for a skilled person. I am a specialist. I have the skill.
So you didn't think you needed to call 911?
No, I'm not saying I don't need. I needed help. I needed help for sure.
Well,
but
911's your help.
News of his death spread rapidly around the world. Fans gathered outside the hospital and Michael Jackson's house. Within hours, tributes began pouring in from fellow artists, world leaders, and millions of grieving fans. As investigators examined the circumstances surrounding Michael's death, attention quickly turned to Dr. Conrad Murray. In August 2009, the Los Angeles County coroner ruled Michael Jackson's death as a homicide.
Were you able to ascertain and make a determination as to the manner of death regarding Michael Jackson?
Yes.
And what was the manner of death?
The manner was homicide.
The cause of the death was determined to be acute propofol intoxication, combined with the effects of other sedatives found in his system. Propofol is a powerful anesthetic typically used in hospital settings under strict medical supervision. Investigators concluded that Murray had been administering propofol to Jackson as a sleep aid inside his home, a practice many medical experts considered dangerous and inappropriate. In February 2010, Dr. Murray was charged with involuntary manslaughter. Prosecutors argued that he had been acting with criminal negligence by administering propofol and failing to properly monitor Jackson's condition. The case would eventually go to trial in 2011. Over the course of several weeks, jurors heard testimonies from doctors, medical experts, security personnel, and members of Jackson's inner circle. Prosecutors painted a picture of a physician who had abandoned basic standard of medical care, while the defense argued that Jackson himself was responsible for consuming the medication that ultimately killed him. One of the most significant moments of the trial came when jurors heard an audio recording of Michael speaking in a heavily sedated state. The recording made by Murray was played in court as evidence and offered a disturbing glimpse into Jackson's condition during the final weeks of his life. Michael's personal assistant was also advised by Murray at the time to go back to the house and make sure that he collected a cream so Michael wouldn't look bad and how the world didn't want him to know he was using. But Michael's personal assistant at the time made phone calls making sure that Murray would not enter the house and change anything about the crime scene.
He asked, he said that there's some cream in Michael's room or house, room, that he wouldn't want the world to know about. And he requested that I or someone give him a ride back to the house to get it so the world, wouldn't know about the cream.
Jurors learned that there was no proper monitoring equipment in Michael's bedroom, no emergency medical team on standby, and no hospital grade set up despite the use of powerful anesthetics. On November 7, 2011, after less than 2 days of deliberation, the jury found Dr. Conrad Murray guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The verdict was met with applause from some of Jackson's fans gathered outside the courthouse. Later that month, Murray was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Although he ultimately served less than 2 years before being released due to changes in California's prison overcrowding policies, he was let go. The legal battle surrounding Michael Jackson's death did not end there. Jackson's family later pursued a wrongful death lawsuit against AEG Live, the company promoting the This Is It concerts. The family argued that AEG had been negligent in hiring and retraining Dr. Murray and should have done more to protect Michael. The trial began in 2013 and lasted several months. Ultimately, the jury ruled in favor of AEG Live. While jurors found that Dr. Murray had been unfit for the job, they concluded that AEG had not known he was unfit when he was hired, and therefore could not be held legally responsible for Michael Jackson's death. Among those involved behind the scenes during this period was attorney John Branca, who had long served as Michael Jackson's legal advisor, alongside music executive John McClane. Together, they oversaw the management of Jackson's assets, music catalog, and business interests. In the later years that followed, Michael Jackson's estate transformed what many believed was a financial crisis into one of the most successful entertainment estates in history. Through music sales, licensing agreements, films, and many business ventures, the estate generated billions and billions of dollars, ensuring that Michael Jackson's legacy would continue long after his death. More than a decade later, questions and debates about Michael Jackson's final months remained. But one thing is certain, the death of the King of Pop marked the end of an era. The comeback that millions had waited for never arrived, and the world was left wondering what might have been had Michael Jackson stepped onto the stage one final time. Michael Jackson's life was full of controversy, media attention, tabloids, rumors, and so much more. But one thing we can all agree on is that Michael Jackson was the greatest performer of all time, and we will never get anyone else like him. Rest in peace to the King of Pop and the greatest that ever was.